I'm going to talk about Jess Nieto and his unique brand of leadership in this community in particular. I've known people like Jess Nieto all my life, but in Bakersfield, I've only known one, and that was Jess Nieto. He was the ultimate internationalist, the ultimate citizen of the world. And most of the folks here in the first panel render homage to Jess Nieto in his early period after he got his PhD and was recruited to come and teach the very first Chicano studies. Where did he get all these ideas? Where did he get all the knowledge to develop the curriculum? Where did he get all the vision of what Chicano studies should be? Well, he got it in Mexico. He actually went to Mexico and started a program called Program Mexica. Program Mexica in the 1970s, maybe Dwayne might remember, sent delegations of Bakersfield students to go and learn Aztec history and anthropology and archaeology and Mexican Republican history and the history of the Mexican Revolution. All that he arranged from Bakersfield upon coming to Bakersfield College. So he used the institution as a springboard to then develop a brand new program called Proyecto Mexica with the Mexican government, the Secretaría de Educación Pública, and who knows how many other institutions. He was very, very good at that. And he developed a program that allowed not just to send delegations of BC students to Mexico to study, but come back with curriculum, come back with programmatic ideas of what to do. This is the bridge of someone who comes from the ancestral California families of California. His family, the Nietos, were the people that inherited one of the great misiones down where today is Long Beach, inherited the Nieto ranch that was the size of present-day Long Beach. He comes from the earliest Mexicanos. He comes from the earliest Californians. And he grew up and got a PhD in anthropology and comes to BC. And then he goes to Mexico and starts the Proyecto Mexica. This is extraordinary because what he did is he created his own bridge to become an internationalist, being the most rooted Chicano I have ever met in my life. I have never met someone that goes back that much. Todos nosotros llegamos apenitas recientemente. Some of us have family that came to the Mexican Revolution. His family came before the independence of Mexico, when this was California, part of New Spain, with the secularization of the missions. That's how far back he comes from. And he does the leap from being highly localized, highly rooted Californian to becoming a global citizen. In the 1980s, it became very obvious in the United States that the most salient issue overtaking the issue of ethnicity and the rights of ethnic groups in America was the issue of immigration. And he was a surfer of history. He was in history. He did not create history, but when he saw history happening, he jumped and joined it and made a contribution. And so in the 80s, it became the most raging issue of our times, and it continues to be the most raging issue of our times, the issue of immigration, as you know, which led to the 1986 amnesty law. And when that happened, it created new space for immigrants to actually start doing fantastic things, like, for instance, getting papers. And one of the earliest people that got involved in that project was none other than our Jess Nieto. Our anthropology PhD guy turned into a paper arranger for immigrants. He started a whole chain of clinics called One Stop Immigration Services, and he is singly responsible for having created a whole enterprise in Kern County that led to over 10,000 immigrants becoming either green card holders or citizens. And that was just Nieto just getting into that period of history. That's how he got his feet wet on the issue, by starting to serve the immigrants directly. So not only was he doing things at BC, he was doing things in the whole county for immigrants, okay? And of course, most of the immigrants were Mexican immigrants. And so the fact that he himself had created Proyecto Mexica and that he came from the early Californians was perfect. So we call those kinds of people organic intellectuals. You know what they are? They're real thinkers, but they are practical thinkers in history, working with the people as the people emancipate itself. History is made by people, but it always needs organic intellectuals like Jes Nieto. And so he was certainly understanding his moment in history and contributing to it. Now, I want to point out, there's Dianne Feinstein in that picture as he was running for senator. And right here on the, well, I don't know if this thing has a laser, but on the left is a very young Kevin De Leon, who is now running against Dianne Feinstein for the Senate. And I also want to point out that that young lady in front, dressed in white, is my wife, who is present right here, and was a staff member of Jes Nieto. And her sister is right next to her. So you see, I have family relations with Jes Nieto's operations. I guess that got me hooked. All right.
He does have a clicker.
No, I want the
laser. Yeah.
How do you point the laser?
The middle button.
The middle button. Okay. Well, let's try it. Okay, there we go. I think you recognize who the barbudo is there. By the way, tomorrow, for the first time in 59 years, there's going to be a president of Cuba, not a Castro, not Raul or Fidel, who Jes had great respect for because they were the leaders of a real social revolution. They themselves were organic intellectuals of the Cuban people. The Cuban people made its own revolution, but they needed the Castros. The Mexican people made the Mexican Revolution, but they needed Zapata. And if you want to talk about intellectuals, they needed the brothers Flores Magón, who were exiled in California. So it's all connected, okay? So here is his next step. After he's done with the immigration thing, he understands there's also a raging war of counterinsurgency being launched by the Reagan administration against the peoples of Central America, most specifically against the peoples of El Salvador, but also Guatemala and Nicaragua. And he joins that moment of history to make a contribution. And one of the things that happened during this ferocious period of the late 80s, where there was a bloodbath, especially in El Salvador, is that certain countries in Latin America finally, for the first time since who knows how long ago, stood up to the United States and forged a thing called the Contadora proposal. The Contadora group had several countries proposing a peace path, a path towards peace in Central America. And Jes Nieto from Bakersfield organizes with other Chicanos right there, and they go, also intellectuals. Some of them go back to the walkouts, and they go to travel to Central America, and they visit El Salvador, and Guatemala, and Nicaragua, and Mexico, and then they go to Cuba, and they interviewed Fidel Castro. And when they come back, they make this scathing report denouncing the bloodbath sponsored by our tax money in El Salvador. He contributed to preventing Ronald Reagan from sending Marines to El Salvador. He contributed to the peace of El Salvador by supporting the Contadora process. He was an internationalist solidarity activist. And so that's what he did in the late 80s, all right? Then, because of his connections in Cuba, he kept going for the rest of the time and began to organize tours of Cuba, delegations of Cuba, participating in conferences in Cuba. He led several delegations from Bakersfield, and there's some pictures there. In 1999, 2000, 2001, 2007, despite the fact that in this period there was a fierce embargo, as you know, which continues to this day. Obama tried to loosen it up, and we're back in the same old situation. Well, he was violating the embargo. He kept taking mostly Latinos to Cuba to make sure that we participate in the solidarity with that country. This is remarkable because none of you ever mentioned what Jes Nieto was doing outside the United States. But that's what caught my attention. Because all my life I've been doing things about outside of the United States, and I finally found another weird person like me. And so that I became instantly attracted to him. All right? So, well, Jes Nieto was always chasing around the most interesting stories in the world. So the next thing he does, and this is in the 1990s, he, of course, understands the implications, the strategic implications of the rapprochement with China. And so he begins a long-lasting, a very long-term relationship with Chinese academies, Chinese merchants, Chinese intellectuals, Chinese cultural artists. He brought delegations of painters. He organized a wonderful artistic display in the Bakersfield Art Museum. He does all this stuff. And I say, Jes, espérate, how do you manage to go to Cuba and then to El Salvador and then to China for, oh, he said, it's very easy. You actually ask if you can send a delegation, and you would be surprised how many people actually love us, especially us Chicanos. That's right. Now, this is where I really got to know Jes, and this is where I really worked together with him. Very proud of him. And when I say him, I don't want to create the great man theory of history. I have here Bernice Bonilla, who was involved, and Dwayne Goff, who was my commander, and we had a number of veteranos, people that had cut their teeth in the Chicano movement, people that had cut their teeth in opening up Bakersfield from the apartheid of the 60s, all the people that have contributed greatly to making Bakersfield a multicultural society. All these people got involved in immigrant marches, in the immigrant movement from 2006 on. When I mention Jes, it's because he contributed a singular contribution to this marches, which is actually shown in the video, which I brought, okay? It shows you how much he did contribute to making it happen. And it's from the clips of all the news. So that we're gonna see. But the next thing he jumps into history, the next surfing board he grabs, and he surfs right into the halls of history, is the great historic marches of the immigrants, which beat every other march ever in the history of the United States, before, during, and after. Nothing compares to the 5 million marchers of 2006. No le llega a nadie. And we had two such rallies in Bakersfield, one April 10th and the other one on May 1st, May Day. The April 10th was a surprise to the organizers. We did not expect maybe more than 2,000-3,000 people.
We had the mayor marched with us.
No, that's on the
Was that
second
the
one.
second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that one, nobody wanted to come even close to us. This one, the first one was, not even the Hispanics wanted to come close to us, okay? It took the second one to finally get some Hispanics to join us. But this march had 15,000 people. There had never been a Latino Chicano march in Bakersfield anywhere remotely close to that, not even during the UFW's heyday. This was remarkable, and the most amazing, remarkable fact was the people marching were the immigrants. This was a family immigrant march. This was not just students. This was not movement heavies. This was not sympathizers and allies. This was the immigrants themselves that marched, which changed history forever in the history of the United States. First time ever that immigrants, as immigrants, act on the stage of history. And Jes was there to contribute. And that is what made me, from that moment on, consider him my closest brother.